A question I've been asking myself over the last couple of days, and a question I've seen in the comments recently, is when are the next Pokemon games going to be announced? I could talk for hours on what my opinions are about what the next Pokemon games will be, whether it will be Pokemon Z, Pokemon X2 and Y2, Pokemon Red and Blue remakes once again, but that's not the question I'm going to be asking today. Today I'm going to be looking at the recent announcement dates for just when Pokemon games were announced, and by looking at these trends, we will see when we can expect an announcement for the next Pokemon games. Take this all with a grain of salt, this is purely speculation, but there is a bit of a hidden trend here, and I hope you guys will really enjoy this video. 500 likes would be really appreciated for my next Pokemon Z related video to be uploaded hopefully tomorrow, and in the comments below let me know when you think the next Pokemon games are going to be announced and what these Pokemon games are going to be. My name is PDWinnall, let's jump straight into today's video. I'm going to be going from the most recent Pokemon games, Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, all the way back to 2008 with Pokemon Platinum, analysing when them games were actually announced, the dates they were announced. And I apologise if this gets a little bit confusing, the prompts on screen should help. I hope you guys will learn something from my little analysis. So starting with the most recent Pokemon games, Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, these games were actually announced very late into the year. In fact, them games announcement dates were actually the latest in the year that they've been in recent memory, May 7th 2014. So you may think, oh, this doesn't bode well for the next Pokemon games. Maybe the next Pokemon games will actually be announced a lot later on in the year. However, the only reason Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire were announced in May, on May 7th, was all the way back in 2009, 5 years previously, Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver were announced on May 7th, which is a cool little hidden secret, I guess. Game Freak announcing another remake of one of their most popular games 5 years exactly on from that original date. Sorry if my wording was a little bit confusing, I hope you guys understood what I was trying to say there. Going back to 2013 with Pokemon X and Pokemon Y's announcement date, Pokemon X and Pokemon Y were actually announced very early on in the year, only 8 days into the year on January 8th. And I wouldn't blame you guys if you guys started thinking, oh, the announcement dates just seem totally random, and sure, there might be an air of that, and the games being announced this early on into the year is a bit of an anomaly, but as we delve further and further back into the years to check on the announcement dates for other Pokemon games, you will start to see that Game Freak actually announced their games fairly early on into the year. Not quite in January, heck, Game Freak only have 3 days to announce their next Pokemon games in January at this point, but Game Freak announcing the next Pokemon games in the first quarter of the year will start to be a little bit more realistic, especially as we look a bit further on through the years to find previous games announcement dates. Let's move on to the next games. 2012 was the year of Pokemon Black 2 and White 2. Pokemon Black 2 and White 2 were announced very early on into the year as well, February 26th on Pokemon Smash. So as you can start to see, Game Freak have a tendency to announce their Pokemon games very early on into the year, and Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire being announced in May was just simply, again, an anomaly, due to them wanting to announce them games on the 5th anniversary of them announcing Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. I'd just like to say very briefly that Pokemon Black 2 and White 2 were the first signals of Game Freak actually releasing their games simultaneously across the globe. There was a 3-month wait for Pokemon Black 2 and White 2 in the West from the initial Japanese release, but the waits for previous Pokemon games were a lot longer from their initial Japanese release. You'll see what I mean in just a second. 2011 was the year of Pokemon Black and White, at least in the West. Pokemon Black and White were actually announced all the way back in 2010, and in Japan were actually released in 2010, meaning us in the West had to wait an entire year for Pokemon Black and White to actually be released. Nowadays, Game Freak actually simultaneously release their Pokemon games, but you can really start to see just how much Game Freak segregated their Japanese and Western audience. How long we had to wait for games to be announced and released officially. Pokemon Black and White were announced on April 9th, 2010 on the official Japanese Pokemon website, again in the first third of the year. The next two game releases, Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver and Pokemon Platinum, aren't as important as times have really changed since then 10 days. Game Freak, as I said, tend to release their games simultaneously across the globe right now. Back in 2009 and 2008, people in Europe and North America normally had to wait 10 months for the new Pokemon games to be released after their initial release in Japan. So these aren't as important, but let's discuss them anyway. 2010 was the year of Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. As you guys already know, as I've already explained, Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver were announced on May 7th, 2009, precisely 5 years before the announcement of Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, so there's no need to discuss that. Pokemon Platinum was first seen on May 11th, 2008, when Koro was leaked around the internet. So once again, it was announced in May, which is fairly late on. But as I said, Pokemon Platinum and Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver aren't as important to this video, as the trends have really changed since then. So after taking a look at the announcement dates of the previous Pokemon games, we can finally answer the question, when will the next Pokemon games be announced with some kind of accuracy? I expect the next Pokemon games to be announced sometime in February, March or April, with March being the most probable date. So that means we are only 3 months away maximum from seeing the next Pokemon games. And I'm really excited for that, and I hope you guys are too. Take this with a grain of salt. We might see an announcement a bit later on in the year. It's just unlikely looking at Game Freak's past track record. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. It's been really fun researching and reminiscing about past Pokemon games. I remember where I was when each Pokemon game was announced, and I don't know, it's just been fun reminiscing. 500 likes would be really appreciated, and I'll try my best to get my next Pokemon Z related video up tomorrow. And leave me a comment, when do you think the next Pokemon games will be announced, and what do you think the announcement will actually contain? Pokemon Z, Pokemon X2 and Y2? Let me know in the comments. Feel free to subscribe so you don't miss any more of my future Pokemon videos, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Peace out.